Hey guys, welcome to Speed Day 1. Here's what's on the agenda for today. You can pause it if you want to. I'm going to hang on to this sheet and it's going to be my cheat sheet for the day, so I'm going to talk through it a little bit. So as we get ready for speed, which we're mostly going to focus on linear running and just moving forward from point A to point B in a straight line. As we focus on that today, I'm going to emphasize a couple of things. First of all, we're going to bring back a warm-up into the equation a little bit here. And as I warm up, I'm going to focus on ankles, hips, and T-spine. So here we go. So starting out on my ankles, a couple different movements for you that we'll bring in. One would be just to sit down and to work slowly, making some rotations with that ankle. And what I'm going to do as my foot is away from me is I'm going to point my toe as far as I can. And when my toe comes back towards me, I'm going to pull that toe in towards my shin as much as possible. So when my foot is away, I'm going to plantar flex and really point that toe. And when my foot is coming back towards me, I'm going to dorsiflex and really try to suck that toe in my shin as best as I can. And after several rotations in one direction, I'm going to switch directions. And in our speed lecture, we talked a little bit about, we sort of revisited triple extension. And at one point, I highlighted the importance of triple flexion. So in order to extend as we're running, I know it sounds silly to say, and I'm going to switch ankles. I know it sounds silly to say, but in order to triple extend, you actually need to triple flex. So doing things like bringing your toe up between steps, bringing your knee up between steps. Those things are going to help. And that as you're in that recovery phase, pulling your foot from back behind you, bringing that knee up out in front of you, and your toe is coming up with it while you're doing that. So when we pull that knee up out in front of us, that's causing hip flexion. That knee is pretty much naturally going to bend, unless you're doing like a prime time run with your legs out straight in front of you, which kind of looks, it's kind of a goofy premature touchdown celebration that you see. So triple flexion, pretty natural at the knee, but the hip, really bringing that knee up in a violent and forceful manner. Not something that's super intuitive, and especially as we fatigue, we stop doing that. So I'm going to take it easy on rolling my ankles now, but I'm going to stay on them, and I'm just going to get some work. I'm going to do a couple second pause, out, in, and forward. And because I'm not going to be sprinting at full intensity today, my warm-up is not necessarily going to be as long as I may do. I'll do a little bit of dynamic warming up, but not a whole lot. So keep that in mind, is that if you're going to be out sprinting for injury prevention, before you start going at 100% effort, make sure you have done a thorough warm-up. So anyways, with that triple flexion, a lot of times when we're fatigued, we don't bring the knees up like we ought to. Whether that's we haven't been coached to do it, or we just get tired and our form breaks down. And then the toe not being pulled up is another super common mistake that can easily be coached. And you can do little drills to just remind them and make them work on that. Good. I probably need to spend some more time on that left ankle. I'll do that at a later date so I don't waste you guys' time. But I can feel, this one really highlights that my left ankle, something from the calf and wrapping down underneath the foot, that fascial line is unhappy. So there's a little kinetic chain through there that's not real happy, and I can feel it as I'm doing this. So that's something I'll visit more on my own time. Not gonna make you guys watch me stretch too much here. So we got our ankles taken care of. If we want to go to our hips, we could go with a 90-90 hip flip. Try to keep those hands up off the ground. Try to maintain a vertical spine. I'll bring it back over. And I'll go one more time. So I've done it, used to add about 2 times. And a more thorough warm-up, probably be more along the lines of 5 times per side. And you could throw in some glute bridges as well. Remember, I like those. That's a good way to throw in some activation along with your mobilization. So we've got our hips there. We can get a little bit more with the world's greatest stretch, which I throw in frequently. And also that's going to start getting into the T-spine as well, which is another hot spot that I'm going to mobilize today. So I've got my back leg straight. My eyes are going to fall my top hand. I'm going to exhale as I reach up there. And then we'll switch it around. And then something else for the T-spine, we could do pretzels. Pretty cheap and easy one right here would just be some, with the sprinting, sprinting in a straight line, I'm not gonna actually be doing a whole lot of rotation or torsion. So maybe just staying in the sagittal plane with some cat and camels. Good, so I'm going to call that on my strict mobilization little block there. And for activation, I'm going to take in some, just a short looped band right there. I'm just going to get that around the ankles. And from there, my goal is to activate my glutes. So if I can get my glutes firing during sprint, that means I'm bringing in a big chunk of extra muscle that's going to help make my force output better, and it's just going to make it easier. And the more my glutes are working, the less my hamstrings are going to get called on, the less my lower back is going to get called on. So I like having active glutes for this movement, for linear sprinting, and even more for more dynamic movements that include change of direction. So right here, low athletic position. And all I'm going to do is maintain a little base stance. And right now I'm just kicking out laterally. I'm kind of reaching, I'm trying to make the most prominent point of my foot, my heel. And as I make that most prominent part of my foot, my heel, that helps those glutes fire up. Because remember, our glutes do 3 things. They hip extend, they abduct our leg, and they externally rotate our foot. So I'm getting in a pretty precise abduction on that one, and then I'm going to start taking it back at 45-degree angle. So now it's going away from my midline, so I'm getting a little bit of abduction, and it's also going back behind me, so I'm also getting some hip extension. And that's firing my glutes pretty good, so that'd be a great thing to do 2 or 3 rounds of. I think you guys get the picture there, but yeah, that one's short and sweet. So for activation, I've got the band that I've just performed with. You can also do some dynamic movements, so I'll go through a few, and these would be a combination of mobilization as well as activation. So typically I would do these for maybe 10 yards of work, but for our purposes today, to keep it a little bit shorter so that you guys can watch me and then perform the activity on your own, I'm just going to do it a few reps in a shorter window here. So one of my favorites to just start with is a lunge with a big high reach. And what am I getting out of this? I'm getting some good activation. My glutes are so activated right now from that band. I really feel it there. But with that high reach, I'm getting some great anterior stretching. So I feel that hip flexor on that bottom leg. I feel that opening up. And that's something that I'm not going to necessarily want to do a big, long, static stretch on prior to going out and doing explosive activities. But to loosen them up and open up a little bit is going to help me typically run faster and jump higher. So just a lunge with high reach, maybe some knuckle drags. Again, just opening up that backside. We don't want those hammies to go through a static stretch, because in an explosive activity, they're going to be prone, like sprinting, especially if we overstride, we're going to have a higher risk of a strain. So any hamstring stretching done prior to sprinting should be pretty moderate, pretty conservative. And I'll just throw in a quad stretch with high reach. And again, these can be just to get you moving. They don't necessarily have to be to activate. But these are open up joints that are going to be associated with some of that activity that we're going to get into here. And a little bit of a crossover kick here. That's going to activate some of my anterior muscles, stretch some of my posterior muscles. And the list goes on. You can do knee hugs. You can do ankle cradles. And then as I'm going to progress out of what I would call just more of a dynamic mobility, I'm going to get into some dynamic activation movements. So we're just going to speed things up a little bit. So you can do them in place, you can do them on the move. We'll do a little bit of both. So in place, some marching can be a great way to just start the day with getting more dynamic. So what am I doing right now? I'm getting an opportunity to practice my arm action. I'm emphasizing a knee drive as my foot is coming up off the ground. My toe comes up in dorsiflexion as well. What's going on with my posture? Starting to wake up a little bit. You know, instead of flopping around for a skip, sometimes I'll tell people to march sarcastically, and they kind of get that like, oh, I'm getting like, here I am marching, but then they start overemphasizing it, and they actually start hitting some great positions and getting some great activation and movement prep out of that. And again, you can do that in place. You can march them around, you know, again, 10-yard stretches sometimes, or just do the body good. And you can take that march right there, and we can start skipping with it, right? And from that skip, you can get other movements in. You can get march to skip, to lateral skip. And then you're getting that lateral push, which is going to be great on a change direction day. So we'll kind of fade away from that a little bit since we're not doing change direction today. But yeah, as we get in our skips, you can just as easily throw in an A skip, where we're really stressing front side mechanics. I'm getting that hand through, my knee is coming up, my toe is coming up with it. We can go with march to skip to B skip. And on that B skip, not a lot of difference. I'm going to emphasize that recovery where I'm kicking my own butt and I'm pawing out forward. And as I paw out forward, what I'm really trying to do is build that pattern of planting underneath the hips. Because the closer I am underneath my hips, the safer I am. I'm safer and it's more efficient. If I have a sprinter who keeps striding out here, but when that foot contact's out in front of them, it's kind of like driving with a foot on the brake and the brake and the gas at the same time. Because our intention is to be moving that way, but when you have some friction out in front of you and it's driving force back into you, that's a little counterintuitive. If the bulk of your mass has inertia going forward, and then you're getting a little bit of feedback from that foot being out in front of you, you're not helping yourself. Also, look how extended that hamstring is. Under great strain, that's ready to pop. So, the B skip really emphasizes just getting that foot underneath. And then I'm a pretty big fan of the C skip, wherein we're just throwing in some extra height and some extra force. We're starting to grease that groove to get a bigger power output. I know I'm forgetting some, but that's probably pretty good, especially for my purposes today, where now I'm going to sort of move on to some of our instruction. So we call that a warm-up or an abbreviated warm-up. And from there, I'm going to have two skills that I want to emphasize today. One is going to be arm action, and two is going to be contact placement. So again, one of my biggest things that I'm going to see is issues with athletes. They want to get forward, they want to get to the ball first, they want to sprint faster, and they know intuitively, or whether they've been told or not, they know that if they can just reach a little bit further with that foot, that's going to be an advantage. The longer stride rate is an advantage. So when they start reaching out there and those hamstrings pop, I'm going to do a whole lot of coaching and thinking about how I can stop them from overreaching and straining hamstrings. And so working on contact placement is going to be our second emphasis for the day. Okay, here we go. So for emphasis 1, arm action. Plenty of ways that you could go about this. Just 2 simple ones we'll go over today. Sit the athlete down. Give them great posture. Not many people will sit down on the ground and maintain a high posture or a great posture like this. Not in the Western nations. In America, this is unusual to see, right? So get them down here, and what are you doing? You're doing a couple of good things. One is you're reiterating the importance of posture, and number 2, you're getting rid of those legs. So you're going to simplify this arm action, because if you coach arm action while they're sprinting, they've got a lot of times they have too much other stuff going on. So with that sprinting or arm action in place, now we talked how that 90 degree coaching cue is so common and popular, but is it appropriate? Is it optimal? I think that's arguable. Now you can coach the 90 degree angle at the elbow, but Are athletes going to stay at 90 degrees while they're sprinting? I think most often they're going to start to extend and reach. But for coaching, this is not such a bad idea. For just reiterating the arm action here within a controlled setting, 90 degrees is not terrible. I just think you might be dreaming a little bit if you expect them to stay that way when they're actually sprinting. So we've got them sitting, they're upright, they're at 90 degrees. Some other cues might be chin to hip or cheek to cheek. I think I've heard pocket to socket, like someone was talking about the sockets in your mouth for your teeth. Pocket to, so if it rhymes, it must be good, right? And all we do is we get those athletes right here, and we talk to them about not crossing over. And I'm so guilty as a runner. I'm naturally going to cross over, but crossing over, sometimes it has virtue and sometimes it has application. But a lot of times, just a straightforward, again, if we're talking about speed and just going from point A to point B, a lot of times we just want to move in a straight line and run forward. So if we want to run forward, we don't want our arms going too crazy. And for me, I'm guilty. This is naturally, I just feel good up here. That's where I'm going to go. But that can end up wasting energy. So coaching-wise, if we just keep them going forward and back, and understanding that when they start running in real life, there may be some deviation and variation, but we see too many people with big old club fists, kind of beating their chest when they run. So cleaning it up during a drill and understanding that it may not be perfect, and in reality, that's okay. And so we're starting out doing that pattern. We've got them sitting up nice and tight. They've got good posture going on. Hopefully I'm doing all right there. And we talk to them. I like to do some build-ups. I'll go with 50%. So they're casual, no big deal. Okay, 75%. We're starting to build up now a little bit. %, 100%, 110%. Okay, so you can start coaching them, having a little bit of fun with it, and make them go faster with their arms than they ever would in a true sprint, because there's less factors going on. You have a more controlled setting. So if you're able to punch your arms faster without the legs going, when you go to run a sprint, and a true sprint, those arms won't be the limiting factor. It'll be, now obviously they need to synchronize and sync up with your legs, but then hopefully the sprinter is more aware of what's going on and how to use those arms. So again, another good arm action would be just marching in place, get them started on the march. Watch those front side mechanics, knee up, toe up, arm action. Arms going front to back. And then something I stole from Lee Taft, who, if this space of agility interests you and you want to get better at it, either as an athlete or as a coach, check out Lee Taft, L-E-E Taft, T-A-F-T. And we were able to get on a Zoom call in the past year or so. And one thing that he said that he does as a virtual test for athletes that he coaches is he will have them run in place. And honestly, I had never thought of this before, but I was able to pepper him with a few questions about it and then start playing around with it a little bit on my own. And honestly, a 10-second diagnostic of individuals just running in place, it's going to show you several great things, but their arm action is one of those things that it's really going to help identify. So aside from sitting athletes down, you can do the same thing standing up. You can have you can give them 60%, 70%, whatever. And the nice thing about standing up is now that core is going to be activated in a more relatable position to how they actually are when they're running. But again, you can do those drills, those seated drills. You can do them standing. But if it strikes you to do it, I think it's a pretty darn good idea. You know, you get them jogging in place, and then you get them sprinting in place. And you're going to be able to see some front side action, how they're planting their foot, their stability, some core stability, so you can have them doing 90 degrees away and facing, and you can say, hey, your hands are crossing over your midline, your toes are plantar flex, but you need to dorsiflex them. So it gives you an opportunity to actually do some interesting analysis about what's going on in a more controlled setting, because once they start sprinting out in the real world, there's more variables and less control. So if they're not giving you clean-cut mechanics in place in a controlled setting, chances are that when they start traveling through space and time, things are going to get even wonkier. Okay, we're going to move on to contact placement. So again, where is that foot striking as it's coming back to the ground? So we've got a few drills that we're going to go over today. Yep, here we go. Okay, so one of our drills that we're going to bring out today, or tools I guess, regarding foot placement, is going to be the prowler. And I will admit I am pretty biased towards prowlers. I think they are awesome. They're pretty cheap. They are good for building strength, for power, for technique. You can use them for conditioning. So I'm a prowler fan. But when it comes to contact placement, that prowler is a pretty great product. So if I think about where I'm at for maybe, if I had a track athlete, maybe they were starting, or a wide receiver, and they're starting in a 3-point stance and they were low, as they come up out of that stance, they're still going to be low. And so their foot strike is still going to be pretty much under their hip. It just looks a little bit different because they're at such a funny angle. So with our prowler, we can grip it low and we can imitate that. We can talk about how their body angle needs to be as far as leaning forward to help them plant and drive the way that we want them going. So when we're in that early phase of acceleration and the body's leaning a little bit more, we can just grip that prowler lower. And actually, as the athletes, I can do something as a coach that I can never do in a normal sprint, is as that athlete is working through that phase of movement, I can walk alongside them and coach them and critique them. And I've seen it firsthand where I do that, and then we walk over and we run a sprint, and they do what I was just coaching them to do. And when you're doing normal sprints, that can take so much longer, and you don't want athletes running full go sprint after sprint, because then you're breaking away from technique and you're really stressing out their body, and you've got risk for injury and central nervous system fatigue and things like that. Whereas a prowler, they can walk through, or you can load some weight on it, and they can do more reps like that. And anyways, I'm biased and I'm a fan. So if we're in that low acceleration phase, that first few steps, we can coach them up on how to do their foot plant right there. And the same thing goes for later phases. You basically just raise their hands up and talk to them about where to plant that foot. And at some point, they may be standing up enough that they're not quite in that walking tall phase. They're not quite vertical, but they're getting closer there. And you talk to them about, why are you pushing that prowler? If you've got an athlete who tends to overreach, you can just bring up how they don't overreach on the prowler, That'd be silly, right? It's inefficient. But it's also inefficient when you're sprinting. You know, you want that foot planting underneath you. So the Prowler is a great tool, not only for technique, but for all those other reasons that we listed already. Just looking at my cheat sheet here. Nice. And I'm going to leave the Prowler alone now because we're going to revisit the Prowler on day 2. All right, time to head over to the wall. Okay, so here we are over at the wall. And like many things that I have changed my mind about and that I will change my mind about again, I would say at first I loved wall drills. I thought they made all the sense in the world. And then as I started learning other things, I sort of turned my back on the wall drills. And then as I found time and time again in my career, is that I sort of end up finding a use for it anyways. Maybe it wasn't as important as I thought it was at first. We kind of got in a fight with the wall. It wasn't really like we weren't friends for a while, and now I respect the wall again. We've got like a mutual understanding. So I think that the wall has great placement for coaching. Is it going to improve performance in someone who already has good technique? Probably not, but I think that it can be a good tool. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater on this one. There's some good stuff that can be accomplished on the wall. And so what I would do is have athletes step up to the wall, put hands on the wall about shoulder height, and then take one big step back. And as you can see, my hands drop down on the wall as I'm doing that. And my goal here is to get a body that's at about 45 degrees. And I am going to slide down so that you guys can see my feet a little bit better. Let's see how this does. So, all right, so I'm on the wall. Stand up. I'm gonna take one big step down. Let my hands slide down the wall. There we go. So now my body's more or less at about 45 degrees. And I'll tell you, if you have somebody talking to you for a while and you're on this wall, it doesn't look like it, but your core is going to start to fire a little bit. And that can be a good thing too, because while you're in here, you know, not necessarily doing a traditional strength session, you get a little bit of core work out of it. So there you go. So here, I think maybe I wasn't in quite the great spot. There you go. That feels more like 45 degrees. So here we have an opportunity to talk about mechanics and planting. If I want to work on that starting position and acceleration, I can bring them way down. If I want to be a little bit more realistic and talk about, you know, maybe yards 5 through 15 are spent more in an angle like this, and maybe towards the top like this. Maybe this is towards I'm accelerating my velocities, improving towards my top end speed before I go vertical. So hands on wall. Maybe not such a big step as I did last time. And I'm right here. And I have the ability to tell them to go right knee up. And they're going to come up through here. And I can tell them to switch. And they can hop over. Have them switch back. I can have them tap. And so you can do little movements like that slow things down, that take away variables, and they give you the opportunity to do the coaching that you want to do. So you can talk about your front side mechanics. You can move their hands up and down the wall and change their body angle and talk to them about what you're looking for. You can have them switch and train like that. So let's go back in. We'll do maybe some reps here. So I'm going to go for, instead of calling out a switch on every switch, I'm going to go in and I'm just going to do maybe like a half dozen reps. So right knee up. And you can have them start and stop on the whistle. And then when they stop, you can see what's that knee doing, what's that toe doing. So even there, I noticed that a couple of my reps, I had some lazy ankles. I wasn't dorsiflexing like I wanted to. and then I corrected it while I was in there. So wall drills have a place and application, and if you're doing that right before you go out and do some sprinting, I'm a little winded right now, but that's because I'm talking and doing an activity at the same time. That's not a hard activity, so you can do that one with little to no fatigue really occurring, and so they're going to be fresh. They're going to have they're going to be refreshed on what their technique is and what the goal is for some of their movements, and then they're going to have the energy to go out and perform. So it's a pretty nice combination I found over time. Took me a little while to get there, but now I'm a little bit of a believer in it. And then we've got the speed ladder, would be sort of our third contact placement or foot strike position drill or exercise that I want to bring in today. So we've got the old speed ladder here, maybe throwing a little ins and outs, maybe do a little hopscotch, maybe do a little 1 foot rotational jump, I don't know, whatever it is. This is a good tool for warming up, maybe ankle stability, maybe having like some fun, and the guys can show up and show off different drills that they've been doing in their hometown, at their high school, or wherever they've got. So it's kind of fun to line them up and say, hey, what do you got? Show us one. And they either invent something or that's one that they know for a long time. A good tool. Doesn't necessarily make people faster sprinting in a straight line. So again, what that speed ladder used to look like was a little bit more like these upside down hurdles that I've got over here. It started small, had a small gap, and it grew bigger as it went along. And what this does is this encourages an increase in stride length throughout the progression of the run. So I'll do my best here. So if you want something that reinforces mechanics and improving the stride length, I'll tell you, for me, what that version of a speed ladder really does is when I hit a good position, it makes me patient. It makes me want to hold that position just a little bit longer and fall, because I know if I reach out to make up the difference in length, I'm going to automatically be out of position. So for me, what that does, again, is it just makes me, once I hit that position, I'm just going to hold it longer and fall into that next spot. And that's what we want to do. That's going to keep us efficient in what we're doing. What I would probably also do on that first rung is I would start further back, because if I'm starting in a 3-point stance, my first step is going to be a bigger bound. But after that, I tend to take some choppier steps if I'm working on technique. In real world application, so this is a great for reinforcing technique, but in real world application, if you look at the work of Joe DeFranco, Coach Joe DeFranco, who has sort of made a name for himself in preparing athletes for the NFL Combine, he's broken down and analyzed what an ideal 10-yard sprint is going to look like, and instead of following all the patterns that come with high velocity sprints and top end speed sprints, when we're in that first 10 yards of acceleration, we tend to be taking bigger, choppier, nastier steps. We've got longer ground contact time. We're expressing more force. And again, that's why I've talked about this before. That's why so many times I'm able to watch bigger, more muscular athletes, male or female, outrun some of their skinnier teammates and opponents, is because they have that ability to express strength in the first few steps. and those things tend to fade away and change as you go into the longer distance. But so that speed ladder is going to help with reinforcing technique in the end of acceleration and post-acceleration running. But it's arguable it's a philosophy thing, is that a lot of coaches would love this, but Coach Joe DeFranco may disagree with it, and some of the teachings he has are counterintuitive to that. So just another thing to keep in mind is how it goes in our world. You got different philosophies, different rationales. And so what I would do with these two drills that we had today, our arm action and our contact placement, is I would turn and I would do some flying 10s. And what that flying 10 is you do about a 20-yard build-up and then a 10-yard hard sprint. So I'll do one, and then we'll say goodbye, just because I know you guys don't necessarily want to see me work on my speed. So if I was working on my speed, I would take long breaks in between to let that ATP, that phosphocreatine rebuild and recover. So unlike maybe some conditioning where you watch me suffer, my speed work is not really, this would not even be much of like a suffer fest. So I'm going to save you guys. I'm going to set up, I'm going to do one rep, and then we'll say goodbye. So I know these pillars are about 5 yards, just a hair longer, so I'm going to short that just a little bit. And again, when I hit this 10-yard pocket, I'm going to do my best to emphasize my foot placement and aggressive arm action. I'm going to back up another 20 yards to get my jogging build-up. Here we go. Sweet, so that's speed day one. Not sure how slow I looked on that sprint. I'll watch it on the replay. I'll probably be cringing like all of you. But what I tried to emphasize there was my front side mechanics, aggressive arms, and planting my feet underneath my hips. That was speed day one. See you guys at speed day two.